In a denial of service attack, we're making a legitimate service such as a web server unavailable for regular users. A good example of this is the SYN flood. This takes advantage of the TCP handshake. Normally we should have SYN from the client to the server, followed by the synchronized acknowledgement, the SYN ACK, and finally an ACK. That's our TCP three-way handshake that establishes a session between a client and a server. In a SYN flood, our attacker will send a SYN request to the server. The server will send back a SYN ACK, but we're just going to ignore that as the attacker, and we're going to keep sending SYN request, SYN request, SYN request. The server keeps sending the SYN ACK, but it keeps these sessions open. And eventually, we've exceeded the amount of sessions open that this single server can support, so it can no longer respond on port 80. Every single session is filled up, and now this service is unavailable. If we're the web administrator, there's several things we can do, but a pretty simple one, when they're looking at their logs, they can see all of these requests are coming from a single host, and we could just block this host. The more advanced attack now is the distributed denial of service. This has a botnet that's executing denial of service on behalf of the attacker. So we have all these compromised systems. They're checking in with the C2 server, waiting for instructions. And there could be hundreds of thousands to millions of compromised hosts in this botnet. Our attacker is going to send an instruction to the C2 server. They're going to say, hey, I want to do a denial of service against the Brady.Life website. And with distributed denial of service, we could actually have legitimate requests. So we're actually going to complete our three-way handshake, and all of these bots are just going to request the website from www.brady.life. And these can be legitimate requests, and they can just request it over and over again. And we're not doing anything malicious, we're just requesting a website. But we can have resource exhaustion, because if we have hundreds of thousands of hosts asking for resources from my single site, and I don't have the scalability, or otherwise I just have a single server, we're going to exceed what I can provide. It can't keep up with all of these hundreds of thousands of requests. And there's really nothing I can, as the site owner, can do, because these are all legitimate requests coming from hundreds of thousands of IPs across the globe with little to nothing in common to focus in on to stop a distributed denial of service attack. The only thing I can do is spend hundreds of thousands of dollars adding more resources behind my server, or creating a huge server farm to try and be able to satisfy these surge requests. We can manipulate other resources on the internet to amplify our denial of service attacks. We're going to look at the specific example of DNS amplification. Again, we have a botnet, but we have less hosts in our botnet this time because we need less compromised systems to achieve the same results of denying service. So again, our malicious user is going to send the command to the C2 server. Our bots check in with the C2 server periodically and get instructions. So they're getting told they're going to do a DNS amplification attack. In the middle, we have DNS resolvers. There are thousands of DNS recursive resolvers on the internet. We're going to pick some open resolvers, and we're going to send them some DNS requests. So each of the victim is going to begin sending spoofed requests to the DNS resolvers, and they're asking for legitimate information about sites. What do I mean by spoofed requests? Let's say our victim has an IP address of 54.231.169.71. They're going to spoof their IP address and say, hey, my IP is 54.231.169.71. So when these DNS resolvers get these requests, they're going to send their response to the victim's network. Why do I say this is amplification? Well, these spoofed requests are likely small, only on the order of 40 kilobytes, and that's going to be a single packet. But the response, because we're going to ask for all the DNS records for a domain, the response could be as much as 4,000 kilobytes. So we're amplifying by a factor of 100. So I can generate 100 times the traffic that I'm using, which makes it difficult to detect where this malicious traffic is coming from, and we're using a lot fewer resources to cause an impact on the victim's site. And this isn't exhausting resources on the victim's server necessarily. Instead, all of these responses are coming through a single network node, and these large packets or large responses will be actually broken up over multiple packets instead of the single packet that the request was initiated. So we're going to overwhelm the network infrastructure. And the switches just won't be able to keep up with all this traffic. They're going to eventually end up dropping most of the packets coming through, which will include a lot of legitimate traffic. So no one will be able to access the victim's site. That'll be offline due to a DNS amplification attack.